6 days, as I said, remain in this summer transfer window. And Alexander Isak is still very much top of the agenda. Newcastle directors Jamie Rubin and Jacobo Solis visited Isak's home yesterday before the game with Newcastle to hold talks about the striker's future. It remains up in the air, and less than a week of the transfer window remaining. Once again, Eddie Howe was quizzed on Isak after last night's game.
That's the ideal from everyone. Our side, Newcastle side, is we want clarity. We want to move forward. We want the sort of narrative to change because we're in the start of the season now. We're into the action and we've got to get results and we've got to try and focus on what we can control. No, there's no intentional dig to Alex, but naturally I want players that are committed to Newcastle. That's one of the most important qualities when you put a team out on the pitch that they show. So that's no dig to anybody. That's just every manager will feel the same way.
OK, let's get a Liverpool perspective then on this Isak saga. We can cross live to Anfield this morning. Delighted to say we can speak to our reporter Peter Stevenson. Morning, Peter. The Isak saga is going to run and run, but could it potentially ramp up a bit now that they've got the game out of the way, they've played each other? Is there a feeling that Liverpool may just go in and make another offer before the window closes?
Well, you know, they say in football, timing is everything. And I suspect the view from Liverpool today will be, yes, we've come away from the North East last night with a memorable win and 3 points that keep us at the top of the Premier League along with Arsenal and Tottenham. But now the dust has settled in the cold light of day. What realistically is their next move? And I just wonder whether they're just going to play a patient waiting game. I think what they'll want to know is what the outcome of those talks were between the Newcastle hierarchy and Isak yesterday. That will be critical because if that still shows the player has an intention to leave Newcastle, Liverpool, you imagine, will feel encouraged in going in with a better offer. If the signals coming out of the North East are that the player, if you like, has been persuaded and there's been subtly suggested that he stays at Newcastle and all manner of options might have made open to him, we don't know the result of those talks, but we'll soon find out. And you would imagine with Eddie Howe desperate for clarity, you have to feel sorry for the guy. I mean, he's had injuries to contend with last night, a suspension, a big defeat at home in front of a passionate crowd. So yeah, the hostility was made very clear to Liverpool last night, but that won't bother them. What will bother them is those talks the player is having directly with the Newcastle hierarchy, and that will be key to determining what happens. But it could be a very long and a very interesting week.
Jamie Carragher last night was critical of Ibrahima Konate's performance in defence. And has this highlighted once again the need to strengthen in that position? Could Liverpool put a bid in for Mike Gay, for example?
Well, you would have thought that has got to be a priority. You know, you look at the evidence before you. They've beaten Bournemouth 4-2. They've beaten Newcastle 3-2. They've conceded 2 goals in 2 games. Now, I heard on the radio this morning coming in, Liverpool didn't concede 2 goals in a Premier League game till October last season in winning the title. So clearly something isn't just right. That dynamic between the 2 centre-halves and the goalkeeper, especially at set pieces, isn't just right. You look at the way that Bruno sneaked in at the back post for that first header. You looked at the ball over the top for the second Newcastle goal. Very reminiscent of a goal scored here by Bournemouth at the start of the season. So that's clearly an issue. And you look at Arsenal coming to town here on Sunday. You look at the way they play from set pieces. You look at the goals they've already scored from set pieces. That could be very interesting. And if a decision hasn't been made by the weekend, you would imagine that certainly that game against Arsenal will flag up yet again that maybe that is a key area. For some reason, it's not just working. Konate just hasn't found his rhythm yet. Maybe Arne Slot is prepared to give him a bit more time. We'll have to wait and see.
Can't really leave you, Peter, without asking about probably what was the biggest story of last night. That was the match winner. It seems already in this Premier League season we're talking about very young child prodigies, and we've seen another one in Rio Ngumoha.
Yeah, young Rio did really well, didn't he? I mean, he came on. I mean, I think most people have probably thought this game's gonna, it's heading for a 2-2 draw, which would have been a remarkable match in itself. But that final act in what was an absorbing football drama last night. I mean, coming on, by all accounts, he's done well in pre-season. He's scored 3 goals, so I don't think the Liverpool management would have been particularly surprised or worried about throwing him on. But to get that magical moment when that ball comes to you, and I mean the composure in such a cauldron to actually take that ball first time. He had time to take a touch. Let's face it, he could have taken a touch and weighed up the options, but just to hit it first time, I don't think Nick Pope actually moved, and that ball nestled in the corner of the net. Game over. A remarkable appearance from him, and we're going to have to wait and see. There could be a couple of very, very promising young teenagers, maybe on the bench on Sunday, but certainly, as you say, the youngster's showing that you're never too young to get your chance, and he looks a class act, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. It was a great game and a great finish. Thank you very much, Peter. Right, Jeff Hendrick will be joining us, formerly of Newcastle and Burnley, of course. Interesting to get his take on the Isak situation, but you're holding the show, mate, up until that point. Now that Newcastle and Liverpool have played each other, was it always unlikely that anything was going to happen before that point? Do we expect things, if anything's to happen, it's going to happen now, in the next couple of days?
You would think so, though. The fact that Alexander Isak has been training on his own for such a long period of time, even if he moved to Liverpool over the course of the last few days, he probably wouldn't have featured. But we will get some form of clarity, definitely, over the course of the next few days, because we have the transfer deadline in 6 days' time. Newcastle's stance remains the same, though, that Alexander Isak is not for sale, and they value him at £150 million. However, at the same time, Liverpool are still looking to sign an attacking player before the transfer deadline. They still feel like they're one short on where they were last season. And at the same time as that, Newcastle are actively looking to sign strikers in this transfer window. Yes, they need to replace Callum Wilson, but they also may need to replace Alexander Isak. So there is a chance that things do move if Newcastle are able to line up 2 suitable strikers over the course of the next 6 days and Liverpool lodge what they deem to be an acceptable offer. It's been reported, and we can report it now ourselves, that Newcastle officials met Alexander Isak yesterday. They visited him at his home as they attempted to convince him to stay at the club. And a new contract would be part of discussions if he was to stay at Newcastle. Newcastle are already in a really good situation because Isak has 3 years left in his contract, but they may find a way to convince him to stay in the Champions League with Newcastle this season, maybe increase his options when it comes to his personal terms. I think he'd get a bumped up contract if he was to stay at Newcastle and commit his future to the club. But Eddie Howe wasn't aware of those conversations taking place, but we can confirm that was the case. But I think the fact that Newcastle have struggled to line up a replacement for Callum Wilson, who departed at the end of June, just shows that it's going to be very difficult for Newcastle to get 2 replacements in for Isak and Wilson over the course of the next few days. So it does feel like a lot needs to happen if Liverpool are to get Alexander Isak. But of course, as we know, in the final few days of a transfer window, things do accelerate. There's more compromise from different parties. They try to get deals done. So I'm not saying it's not going to happen, but a lot needs to happen for this man to be wearing the red shirt of Liverpool next week.
And obviously, Newcastle need Isak. Everyone knows that, of course. But when you look at the first 2 games of the season, they've only got 1 point. And the amount of chances that they've had, they play some really good football, really good build-up play. Has that just highlighted how much they need to keep hold of him?
That'll be the real frustration. They've had 2 really tough games to start the season. Aston Villa away, Liverpool the champions at home, but just 1 point. But already they're severely depleted when it comes to strike options. If everybody was available, even if Alexander Isak was available, you'd think they need another striker. Anthony Gordon, who's been playing as a central striker, he's now out for the next 3 matches. So it means heading into the game this weekend against Leeds, the main strike option, the only strike option, is William Asula, who now has 2 Premier League goals. He got his 2nd Premier League goal yesterday. He's the only recognised forward option for the next 3 matches. Joel Linton, who was converted from a striker to a midfielder by Steve Bruce, he can't even reprise that old role because it looks like he's injured now as well. Sandro Tonali may be missing this weekend. Fabian Schär could be missing the game due to suspension. And so you look at that lineup there, they'll just be pleased they have slightly more depth in the midfield and defensive areas now. When it comes to strike options, they really, really are thin on the ground, and that'll be the disappointment for Eddie Howe. The fact is, there was so much excitement heading into this season. Yes, they've done well in terms of recruitment in midfield and defence and goalkeeper, actually. But in terms of their strike options, they are severely lacking for two fairly winnable games against Leeds and Wolves in the next few weeks.
Right, OK, I think we should move this back to Alexander Isak, shouldn't we? Because we've got a former Newcastle player with us in the studio, and you missed our chat in part one. We mentioned the fact that two of the co-owners had gone to Isak's house before the Liverpool game. We don't quite know what they spoke about, but I presume they're still trying to convince him to stay. In light of that, and given that time is ticking, do you think that with every day that goes by, he's more and more likely to stay at Newcastle?
Yeah. Like you said, there's probably not the replacements there. I know they want two strikers maybe in, especially with Gordon getting suspended last night. It's going to be really difficult for them to get not just players in, but the players they want that suits their squad, the mould, the player that Eddie Howe wants. So it's going to be really tough. And for me, watching the game last night, I'm sure Isak was watching it, seeing the atmosphere, seeing his teammates put in that effort and really should have beat Liverpool. You know, he might look at it and think, if I was there, we could have won the game. So potentially, with time running out, he might end up staying. He's going to have to ask for forgiveness at the end of the day. But I think if he gets himself fit and on the pitch and puts in displays like he did last year, it'll be all forgotten in a few months' time.
Yeah, absolutely. Any owners ever turned up at your house and convinced you to stay?
No, unfortunately, I wasn't in the situation where I was probably wanted as much as Isak, but I wish I was sort of, in the driving seat like him and wanted by so many clubs. But for me, he's running out of time, and I think he should make a decision, really. I think it's up to him and the club. They've had that big meeting yesterday, and I think there is time for him to just turn it around.
From a Liverpool point of view, though, do you agree what Jamie Carragher said yesterday? And initially, when we heard that Isak was of interest to Liverpool, a lot of people said, well, do they need him? They've got so much firepower. But Carragher looked at the bench yesterday and said, I think they need more attacking reinforcements because they had Harvey Elliott, Ngumoha and Federico Chiesa on the bench. So do you actually agree with Carragher that Liverpool could do with an attacking reinforcement?
Well, who they brought on won the game for
them.
That's true. But, of course they do. I think we said about Arsenal earlier, and they're assembling a squad where if anything happens, whether it's injuries or suspensions, they have people who can fill in. Liverpool are still a little bit short in that department up top, maybe at the back as well. And Newcastle certainly are as well. So I think both clubs would like Isak. We can't clone him and one be at each club. But they definitely need another striker in or a winger.
Well, the closest thing to the clone is at Liverpool already, and that's Ugo Ekitike, isn't it? We saw that fascinating comparison on Monday Night Football last night. Will Isak be a Newcastle or Liverpool player then, come September the 1st?
I honestly think Newcastle, yeah. I think maybe they've had vital talks yesterday, time's running out, can't get the players in that Eddie actually wants in the club. So I think they'll have to, like I've said before, kiss and make up and get him back on the pitch.
James, this is your chance to alienate a fan base. Will he be a Newcastle or a Liverpool
I think
player?
he'll be a Newcastle player simply because Newcastle find it so hard to find replacements for Alexander Isak. That's the only thing. And they don't want to be in a situation where they're paying way over the odds for a player like Wissa or Strand Larsen because they've got the Isak money. So I think that Isak will stay. I think there may be a new contract. And we wait to visit it all again next summer.
Yeah, okay.